imagine for a second that you're sitting in the left seat of like a small single-engine Cessna.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you're looking out over the dashboard, the engine is humming, and you were just about to take off from this tiny rural grass strip.
Right.
And your ultimate destination, it's the airspace,
Yeah.
right above a massive international hub, somewhere like Chicago O'Hare or LAX.
That's quite the jump.
It is. And, say you are a high school student right now, maybe looking at a future in STEM or engineering or, aviation, and you are planning this ultimate cross-country flight.
Yeah, the dream flight.
Exactly. So you look up through the windshield, and the sky, it just looks completely empty. Like it's just open blue air stretching forever.
Just endless blue.
Right. But the reality is entirely different. That sky is actually this incredibly complex, invisible, multi-layered cake.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's sliced up by these really strict rules, specific equipment requirements, and air traffic controllers who are watching literally every move.
Yeah, the sky is fundamentally structured, and really our mission for this deep dive is to decode that invisible architecture.
Right.
We're going to break down the FAA's Big Six airspace classifications, so that's classes A, B, C, D, E, and G.
Right, the whole alphabet soup.
Exactly. And we'll also navigate through the danger zones, which are known as special use airspaces.
Which sound terrifying, honestly.
They definitely can be. And we want to do all of this by looking through two distinct lenses. First, the eyes of the pilot, who actually has to engineer this perfect route.
Yeah.
And second, through the eyes of the air traffic controller, who is, actively managing thousands of tons of metal moving at hundreds of miles per hour.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because every single flight, whether you're in a tiny crop duster or a massive Boeing 787, it begins with the wheels on the ground.
Right. Everybody starts at zero altitude.
Yeah, so for our cross-country flight taking off from that quiet rural grass strip, we are starting in what the FAA calls Class G airspace.
Yep. Good old Class G.
And the sources refer to this as uncontrolled airspace. But I gotta say, if I'm a passenger or like a brand new student pilot, the word uncontrolled sounds a little terrifying.
It does sound bad. Yeah.
Right. Like, does that mean there are absolutely no rules down there? Is it just this Wild West free-for-all where anyone could just do whatever they want?
It's a really common reaction to that term, honestly. But uncontrolled does not mean unregulated. The FAA still enforces very strict mandates.
Okay, so what does it actually mean then?
Well, what uncontrolled technically means in this context is that air traffic control, the human beings sitting in those dark radar facilities.
Oh, the controllers.
Yeah, they have neither the authority nor the responsibility to sequence or separate the air traffic in that specific block of sky.
Oh,
So
interesting.
you don't need to call them for permission to take off. And, you actually don't even need a radio to fly there.
Wait, really? No radio at all?
No radio required. Because you don't have a controller actively keeping you away from other planes. The primary rule of Class G is just the mandate to see and avoid.
Wow. So the responsibility falls entirely on the pilot's eyes. You just have to physically look out the window and, well, not hit anything.
Precisely. And because you are relying on human eyesight, the FAA dictates specific visual flight rules, or VFR weather minimums.
Okay, so like how clear the sky has to be.
Right. For instance, if you are flying in Class G during the day, below 1,200 feet AGL.
An AGL is above ground level, right?
Exactly. Meaning your actual physical height above the dirt below you. If you're below 1,200 feet AGL, you only need 1 statute mile of visibility, and you just have to stay clear of the clouds.
Just 1 mile. I mean, if two planes are flying right at each other at over 100 miles an hour, 1 mile of visibility feels incredibly close.
It's very close.
That gives you, what, mere seconds to react?
Yeah, just seconds. But the underlying logic is that aircraft operating down low in Class G are typically flying much slower.
Okay, that makes sense.
1 mile gives a pilot flying a, slow-moving single-engine plane just enough time to physically see a hazard and pull away.
Right.
But this specific layer of airspace is actually the site of a massive modern engineering debate right now.
Oh, because of drones, right. Unmanned aircraft systems.
Exactly. Drones.
Yeah, because commercial drones are just exploding in popularity right now, from like
Mhm.
real estate photography to literal package delivery.
And currently, under FAA rules, commercial and recreational drones weighing less than 55 pounds are generally limited to flying at or below 400 feet AGL.
Okay.
So they operate in this exact same uncontrolled Class G airspace, usually without needing any special ATC authorization at all.
But wait, if I'm flying my Cessna out of that grass strip, I'm moving at like 70 or 80 miles an hour right after takeoff.
Right.
and I'm operating in that exact same 400-foot band of sky, how on earth am I supposed to spot an Amazon delivery drone that's the size of a toaster before it basically goes through my windshield?
Yeah, and that is the multi-billion-dollar question for future aviation policymakers.
I bet.
Integrating thousands of autonomous drones with human-flown helicopters, crop dusters, small planes, all sharing that exact same uncontrolled space, it's incredibly
Yeah,
difficult.
it sounds like a nightmare.
There is an active debate right now about whether the FAA should carve out a completely new classification of airspace from the surface up to 400 feet.
Just for drones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
specifically designed for autonomous systems rather than just lumping it all into Class G.
Man, it really makes you realize that these rules, which were probably written like 50 years ago, are basically colliding with the tech of today.
They really are.
But, okay, let's say we've successfully taken off. We dodge the local drones, we leave the grass strip behind, and we pull back on the yoke to climb.
Nice and smooth.
We're heading cross-country toward the big city. As we climb out of Class G, we enter this vast expanse of controlled en route airspace. And this is Class E, right?
Yep, Class E is essentially the connective tissue of the national airspace system.
Connective tissue, I like that.
It fills in all the gaps between all the other airspaces. It is officially controlled airspace, but the genius of its design is that for a VFR pilot, someone flying visually in good weather, you still don't need a specific clearance to fly there.
Oh, so you can just kind of cruise.
You can just cruise. However, as you climb higher within Class E, the physical environment changes. Planes get a lot faster, and the FAA requires your machine to, well, step up its game.
Meaning you need better gear.
Exactly. Once you cross 10,000 feet MSL, which is mean sea level, your altitude relative to the ocean, not the ground directly below you, you are legally required to have specific technology on board.
Right, and according to the sources, that technology is a transponder and something called ADS-B out equipment.
Yep, ADS-B.
I know ADS-B is supposedly this huge revolution in modern aviation, but how does it actually change the way planes navigate compared to, like, the old days of radar?
Well, think about traditional radar. You have a giant niche on the ground. It spins around, shoots a radio wave into the sky, hits the metal of an airplane, and waits for the signal to bounce back.
Right, like the classic green sweeping circle in movies.
Exactly. But it's passive, and it has dead zones. ADS-B Auto, which stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, flips that whole model upside down.
How so?
The airplane itself uses GPS satellites to independently calculate its precise location, its altitude, and its speed. This whole data package is called its state vector.
Okay, state vector.
And then the airplane actively broadcasts that state vector out to the world every single second.
Oh, wow. So instead of a controller's radar searching for this hidden target in the sky, the airplane is constantly shouting like, here I am, here's how fast I'm going, and here's exactly where I'm headed.
Yes. And it shouts it not just to air traffic control, but to the iPads and dashboard screens of other airplanes nearby.
So everyone sees everyone.
Yes. It creates incredible situational awareness. And if you want to climb even higher into Class A airspace, you need a specific, high-powered version of this tech called a 1090ES, which broadcasts on a dedicated 1090 megahertz frequency.
Okay, let's talk about Class A, because that seems like a totally different world. It starts at 18,000 feet and goes all the way up to 60,000 feet. This is where, like, the airliners and the corporate jets live.
Oh, it is the most restrictive airspace in the entire system. Visual flight rules are completely forbidden.
So no flying by looking out the window.
Zero. You cannot look out the window to separate yourself in Class A, mainly because aircraft are closing in on each other at near supersonic speeds.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Every single flight must be conducted under Instrument Flight Rules, or IFR, and you absolutely must have an explicit clearance from a controller.
You know, here is how I'm picturing this whole vertical structure. Class E is kind of like the massive interstate highway system.
Okay.
It spans the whole country, it's open to everyone, but if you want to drive in the high-altitude fast lanes above 10,000 feet, your car must be legally equipped with advanced safety features, like ADS-B.
That's a great way to look at it.
But then Class A, though, is like a high-speed underground subway tunnel. You can't just wander your bicycle into a subway tunnel.
No, you definitely cannot.
You have to be a certified train, operating on a highly regulated track, strictly managed by a central dispatcher.
That analogy captures the operational reality perfectly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, for a professional pilot, it dictates the entire planning phase of a flight.
Oh, because of the equipment.
Yeah. Before you ever start the engine, you are looking at the route and assessing the physical hardware of your airplane. If your transponder is broken or your ADS-B out avionics are acting up, you are physically incapable of legally entering those upper layers of the cake.
Wow, so the invisible airspace actually dictates the engineering requirements of the physical machine.
Exactly.
That's wild. Okay, so we've climbed up, we've cruised along our interstate highway in Class E, and now we are pulling back the throttle. We are descending because we are getting closer to our massive hub, like Chicago or LA.
Getting into the busy stuff.
Yeah, the air traffic is getting way denser. The invisible boundaries in the sky are getting much stricter.
Hmm.
We are entering the domain of the terminal airspaces, so that's Class D, Class C, and eventually Class B.
Right. Terminal airspace is really all about funneling traffic safely to a runway.
Okay.
Class D is the simplest form. It's basically a cylinder that generally goes from the surface up to 2,500 feet above a smaller airport that has an operating control tower.
Got it. A simple cylinder.
But then Class C is a step up. It protects busier regional airports. And Class C has a very specific shape. It starts with an inner surface circle with a 5 nautical mile radius going from the ground up to 4,000 feet.
Okay, the inner core.
Right. But then it has an outer shelf, a 10 nautical mile radius that starts at 1,200 feet and goes up to 4,000.
Oh, I see. So it looks a bit like a mushroom on the map.
Exactly, a mushroom.
But whether it's the cylinder of Class D or the mushroom of Class C, the absolute golden rule from the sources is that a pilot must establish two-way radio communications before crossing that invisible boundary.
Before crossing, yes, that is crucial.
And there is a nuance here that honestly seems like a trap for a student pilot. What does establishing communications actually mean in a legal sense?
Oh, it's a critical distinction, and people get in trouble with this. Let's say you are approaching that Class C boundary. You press the mic button and say, approach. This is Cessna 123 Alpha Bravo, 20 miles out.
Right, I'm saying low.
But the controller is handling a minor emergency somewhere else and is incredibly busy. They just quickly key their mic and say, aircraft calling, stand by.
Well, I talk to them, and they talk back. Am I good to cross the line?
Emphatically, no.
Really?
Yes. By saying aircraft calling, the controller has not acknowledged your specific identity. They don't know who you are or where you are. If you cross the boundary right then, you have violated controlled airspace.
Oh, wow. So what do you do?
You literally have to fly your plane in circles outside the line until they call you back. The legal trigger is your call sign.
The call sign is the key.
Exactly. If the controller says Cessna 123 Alpha Bravo, standby, then communications are officially established. Even though they told you to stand by, they have verbally identified you on frequency, and you can legally enter the airspace.
That is wild. So aircraft calling means hit the brakes, fly in a circle.
Yes.
But Cessna 123 means you are in the system. That is a subtle but massive difference.
It's everything.
Okay, so Class C catches the regional traffic.
Yeah.
But our flight plan has us heading right into the heart of O'Hare. That is Class B, which honestly sounds like a completely different beast.
Oh, Class B protects the nation's busiest airports. The traffic volume is staggering. This airspace usually goes from the surface up to 10,000 feet.
Okay.
And here, the Class C rule completely goes out the window. Just establishing communication with your call sign, not enough.
Wait, really?
Really, you must hear a very specific phrase. Cleared to enter Class B airspace. Without that explicit permission, you hit a brick wall in the sky.
Cleared to enter.
Exactly. Furthermore, Class B is surrounded by a 30 nautical mile Mode C veil.
A veil.
Yeah, even if you are just flying near O'Hare without ever going inside the actual Class B boundaries, if you are within 30 miles, your aircraft must be broadcasting its altitude and ADS-B data from the surface all the way up to 10,000 feet.
Wow. They are not messing around. And the shape of Class B is really famous in aviation, right?
Yeah.
It's always described as an upside-down wedding cake.
Yep, the wedding cake.
But why go through the trouble of designing a tiered cake? Like, why not just draw a giant, simple cylinder from the ground up to 10,000 feet and tell everyone to stay out?
It comes down to balancing safety with efficiency and, really understanding how different airplanes fly. Think about a massive Boeing 787 coming in from Europe.
Okay.
It starts its descent from 30,000 feet miles and miles away. It needs a very wide, protected area high up to begin its approach.
Right, because it's so big and fast.
But as it gets closer to the runway, its altitude drops and its flight path becomes much narrower. Therefore, the protective airspace can actually taper down to a smaller circle at the surface.
So the top layer of the cake might be like 30 miles wide, but the bottom layer actually touching the ground is much tighter.
Exactly. And this tiered design is actually a lifesaver for smaller, slower traffic.
Really? How so?
Because the outer layers of the cake don't touch the ground. A student pilot in a Cessna can fly safely at, say, 3,000 feet directly underneath the outer shelf of the 787's airspace.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, they can transit past the busy city without ever having to talk to the overworked approach controller, while the heavy jet stays safely contained inside the upper layers above them. It physically separates the fast, heavy metal from the slow, light metal.
I love that. The shape of the airspace is basically engineered to trap different speeds of traffic.
Beautifully engineered, yes.
If we look at this from the air traffic controller's point of view, what does it actually take to manage the inside of that wedding cake?
Working Class B radar is like playing a high-speed, three-dimensional game of chess where none of the pieces ever stop moving and fuel is constantly burning.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
The controller is the absolute maestro. They are providing mandatory separation services for every single aircraft inside that cake, issuing specific headings, specific altitudes, constantly trying to weave small VFR planes in between massive IFR jets.
Right.
To understand how intense this is, contrast it with a small, non-towered airport.
Like our grass strip at the beginning.
Right. At a non-towered field, controllers don't even exist. Pilots tune in to a shared radio frequency called a Unicom or CTAF Common Traffic Advisory Frequency.
Oh, so they just figure it out themselves.
Exactly. The pilots just talk to each other, announcing their positions and self-coordinating who lands first. In Class B, self-coordination would result in disaster within minutes.
Yeah, I can't imagine a bunch of jumbo jets just chatting on an open channel trying to figure out who gets the runway.
No, the maestro orchestrates every single move.
But while you are navigating the rings of this wedding cake, constantly talking on the radio, checking your altitude so you don't accidentally bust a shelf,
Right.
you also have to keep an eye on the map for areas where you fundamentally do not belong. We really need to talk about special use airspace, the danger zones.
Oh, yes. Special use airspace exists to confine extremely hazardous activities or to protect national security. And the absolute strictest of these are prohibited areas.
Prohibited meaning?
These are blocks of airspace, like the ones over the White House, the Capitol building, or Camp David. Flight through these areas is entirely forbidden. It is a solid, invisible wall.
Prohibited means prohibited. No exceptions whatsoever.
Zero.
But then there are restricted areas, which are slightly different, right?
Right. Restricted areas contain unusual, often invisible hazards to aircraft. This is where the military conducts artillery firing, aerial gunnery, or, tests guided missiles.
Stuff you definitely don't want to fly into.
Absolutely not. You can theoretically fly through a restricted area, but only if it is currently inactive and you have explicit permission from the controlling agency.
And if you don't have permission.
If you penetrate an active restricted area without permission, you are quite literally flying into a live firing range.
A very fast way to have a very bad day.
Yes.
But here's where the sources completely blew my mind. There is another category called MOAs, Military Operations Areas.
Ah, the MOAs.
These are blocks of sky used by the military for air combat tactics, intercepts, aerobatics, literal fighter jets doing dogfights.
Right.
Yet legally, a civilian VFR pilot in a slow little Cessna can fly right through an active MOA without asking anyone's permission.
That is correct.
Why on earth would the FAA legally allow a civilian to wander into a dogfight?
What's fascinating here is that it highlights a philosophical conflict. The FAA is tasked with balancing the needs of military readiness against the public's legal right to use navigable airspace.
Okay, so the airspace belongs to the public.
Exactly. They cannot just permanently block off massive chunks of the American sky. So technically, VFR pilots are allowed to transit a MOA. However, legal does not always mean smart.
Yeah, I would say not.
If you choose to fly through one, extreme caution is required.
Because see and avoid doesn't really work when the hazard is like an F-16 doing Mach 1 out of nowhere.
Precisely. The military jets are moving so fast and pulling such extreme maneuvers that relying on your side window to spot them is just incredibly dangerous.
So what's the workaround?
Pilots are heavily encouraged to use services like SUAIs, the Special Use Airspace Information Service, to call ahead and find out if the MOA is hot or cold before deciding to cross the boundary.
Yeah, I would definitely prefer to ask before entering combat airspace.
Highly recommended.
But let's say the absolute worst happens. A pilot gets distracted, their iPad dies, they misread the map, whatever, and they accidentally blunder into highly restricted national defense airspace, like the flight restricted zone around Washington, D.C.
Oh, boy.
What actually happens next? like practically.
You immediately trigger intercept procedures, and the situation escalates from a simple navigational error to a major national security incident in minutes.
Minutes.
Yeah. First, the military may attempt to get your attention from the ground. You might suddenly see intense visual warning systems, like bright lasers or flashing lights beamed directly at your cockpit.
Just to wake you up.
Exactly. But if you do not immediately turn away, fighter jets or armed helicopters will be scrambled to intercept you.
So you look out your left window and suddenly there is a military jet just flying right on your wing.
Yes, literally casting a shadow over your plane. And when that happens, you must immediately tune your communication radio to 121.5 megahertz.
21.5. Why that specific channel?
121.5 is the international VHF guard frequency. It is basically the universal 911 of the sky. Every air traffic control facility and every military interceptor monitors that frequency constantly.
Okay.
If you hear a military pilot talking to you on 121.5, it means you have messed up on a monumental scale. They will give you explicit instructions on where to turn and where to land.
And if you don't listen?
If you fail to comply, you face severe legal consequences, the permanent loss of your pilot's license, and potentially the use of lethal force.
So what does this all mean for our high school student sitting in the left seat?
Right, back to the student.
We started on a grass strip. We debated the drones in uncontrolled Class G. We climbed up the Class E interstate, required the ADS-B upgrades, looked up at the high-speed Class A subway tunnel, dodged the artillery in the restricted areas, and finally requested clearance to enter the intricate, upside-down wedding cake of Class B to land in the city.
It's quite the journey.
Looking at all these invisible layers, which airspace actually demands the most from a pilot?
Honestly, traversing Class B airspace or navigating near heavily restricted defense areas requires the absolute highest level of proficiency.
Because there's just so much going on.
The margins for error are razor thin. You need flawless pre-flight planning, incredibly sharp radio communication skills to talk to those maestros, and just a relentless sense of situational awareness. You must know your exact position in three-dimensional space at every single second.
It is a phenomenal amount of information to process. The sky is just this highly engineered environment.
It really is. And, here is a final provocative thought to leave you with as you plan your cross-country flight.
Let's hear it.
We have talked about all these letters, A, B, C, D, E, G, and the special use danger zones as if they are permanent static lines printed on a paper map.
Right.
But they aren't. The airspace is alive. It is constantly shifting.
Wait, what do you mean shifting?
Consider temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs. Imagine you have perfectly planned your route. You checked every altitude, every single radio frequency. You take off.
Okay.
But while you are en route, a massive stadium event kicks off, or the president unexpectedly travels to a city near your path, or, say, a lightning strike starts a raging forest fire in the hills right below you.
Oh, wow.
In an instant, the FAA can generate a TFR. An invisible, legally binding cylinder of restricted airspace can pop into existence right in front of your flight path while you are 5,000 feet in the air.
So the map actually changes while you are actively flying through it.
Exactly. The rules of the sky are completely dynamic, so the ultimate test for any pilot, or any controller really, isn't just knowing the permanent alphabet.
It's being adaptable.
Yes. It is maintaining the mental flexibility and the situational awareness to navigate invisible walls that can appear entirely out of nowhere.
Man, it really makes you look up at the clouds differently.
Doesn't it?
The next time you see a plane flying overhead, whether it's a massive 787 or a tiny Cessna, you will know exactly what kind of invisible, shifting maze they are actively navigating, from that rural grass strip all the way to the international hub.
Exactly right.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and keep exploring the skies.